My beloved child, there are moments in life that do not arrive with noise, yet they carry enough weight to redirect an entire journey. They do not shout, they do not force, they do not put on display. They come as a quiet, inner urging, deep within the spirit, like an unseen wind, nudging you away from an old position before the ground beneath it begins to give way. This is such a moment, not because danger is loudly apparent, but because what is forming ahead is decisive for your identity and your destiny. I call you to move not because you are weak, but because you are perceptive enough to recognize that standing still can sometimes be the most subtle form of danger. The movement I speak of does not begin with your feet, but with an awakening within. It begins when you realize that not every invitation is a blessing, not every open door leads to safety, and not every form of authority carries life. There are influences that wear the clothing of legitimacy, that speak in the language of order, discipline, and reason, yet quietly distort the inner axis, misalign the moral compass, and erode the purity of motive. When I urge you to run, I am not speaking of panic, nor of a fleshly survival response. I am inviting you into a higher transition, one in which you choose to step out of a sphere of influence before it has the chance to shape you into a pattern that does not belong to me. You must understand that some forces do not need direct attack to cause harm. They come through gentle access, through advice that sounds reasonable, through approval mixed with conditions, through standards presented as pathways to maturity. They do not demand that you betray me outright. They only require you to loosen a little, adjust a little, compromise a little, and within those little concessions, your essence begins to be reshaped. I call you to leave before these subtleties take root, because I know what unfolds when one remains too long in an influence that has not been discerned. This call is also a test of spiritual sensitivity. Not everyone hears it, and not everyone takes it seriously. Many people move only after crisis erupts, after wounds are formed, after consequences become visible. But you, my child, are being invited to respond before the storm arrives, before pressure reaches its peak, before identity is stretched to the point of distortion. Obedience in this season does not appear as dramatic action. It is found in timely withdrawal, in refusing what does not resonate with the life within you, and in keeping yourself from currents that could carry you away from the center I have established. I know this movement is not easy. It requires you to accept uncertainty, to move without seeing the entire picture, and to step into what feels like empty space. But remember, this emptiness in my hands is never void. It is space for reordering, repositioning, and strengthening foundations. When you leave a former position at my leading, you are not abandoning safety. You are exchanging surface-level security for a deeper stability. I do not call you to move so that you may be lost, but so that you may be aligned with the true axis of purpose. There is a subtle yet crucial difference between fleeing and sacred movement. Fleeing is born of fear. Movement in response to calling is born of clarity. Fleeing turns away from responsibility. Discerning movement protects what is sacred so that greater responsibility can be carried later. I am not removing you from testing. I am removing you from influences that could cause you to fail within the test. In this, your obedience today becomes preparation for endurance tomorrow. You must also recognize that this movement is not a sign of rejection, but of consecration. Not everyone is called out of certain environments. Not everyone is asked to maintain distance from specific forms of authority. This does not elevate you above others, but it does reveal that your journey requires a different level of inner purity and freedom. I cannot build what I intend upon a foundation mixed with pressures, expectations, and standards that do not originate from me. Therefore, I call you out not to isolate you, but to preserve you. And in this movement, I do not leave you exposed or alone. My presence is not limited by location or circumstance. When you leave a space, you do not leave me. On the contrary, you are moving deeper into an orbit where my presence operates with greater clarity and strength. There are places where I do not act openly, not because I am weak, but because I am waiting for you to step away, so that I may reveal what I desire to do within you without interference. My beloved child, the urgency of this call does not come from an immediate threat, but from a window of time that is opening. There are opportunities that exist only briefly, and timely discernment is the key to stepping through them. If you hesitate, if you attempt to explain everything through pure logic, if you wait until all things become clear by the standards of what the eyes can see, you may miss the moment that requires action. I am not asking you to understand everything. I am inviting you to trust enough to move. Therefore, let your heart grow still before me and listen. Do not allow the noise of reasonable arguments to drown out the deep prompting echoing within your soul. Do not let the fear of loss cause you to cling to what is familiar but no longer nourishes life. I am leading you out of one season in order to bring you into a deeper dimension, where your character will be preserved, your faith strengthened, and your vision expanded. This call to move is not the end of something, but the beginning of a refining process. When you respond, you are declaring that you choose life over convenience, clarity over false security, and me over every other form of assurance. And in that choice, I will go before you, prepare the way, and set your feet upon a foundation that cannot be shaken. My beloved, after the call to move is released, there will come a moment when you encounter what makes that call necessary. It will not arrive as a loud disruption, nor as an obvious confrontation. It comes as the first contact between your soul and a form of authority carrying invisible weight. Not all authority flows from the source of life. Some authority is built from structure, titles, and social influence, yet lacks alignment with truth. When you stand before it, the pressure does not force you to resist. It invites you to adjust subtly, gradually, in steps so small they are easy to overlook. That pressure often speaks the language of reason. It presents order, discipline, and efficiency. It maps out safe paths where you are accepted if you know how to place yourself correctly. Speak in the right tone and stay in line. But, my child, be alert. There is a fragile difference between order that serves life and order that suffocates the soul. When authority no longer leads you into inner freedom, but requires you to trade integrity for surface-level peace, that is when the alarm of discernment must sound. You will feel this pressure not only from the outside, but also from within yourself. A part of you wants to be understood, to be acknowledged, to stand secure among those who hold the power to define. These desires are not wrong. They become dangerous when they are exploited. Invisible pressure rarely threatens directly. Instead, it suggests that you can keep everything faith, character, and approval if only you are a little more skillful, a little more flexible, a little quieter. It is precisely here that discernment becomes the guardrail of the soul. Hear this clearly. True authority does not need to make you smaller in order to prove its strength. True authority lifts you without distorting who you are. When you feel compelled to dim your light, soften truth, or conceal what I have placed within you in order to fit, That is no longer guidance, it is misalignment. I do not call you to live in opposition or rebellion, but neither do I call you to exchange your essence just to survive within a system that does not speak the language of life. Invisible pressure follows a familiar pattern. It measures your reactions before it measures your actions. It listens to your voice when you are questioned, watches your eyes when you are doubted, and observes where you lean when asked to choose between convenience and faithfulness. Not every question seeks truth. Some questions are designed to make you doubt yourself. When you find yourself over-explaining what I have already spoken clearly within you, stop. Clarity does not need permission to exist. In those moments, you are tested at a level more subtle than outward behavior. The test does not ask what you do, but who you are when placed under the gaze of authority. Do you remain steady when your words are weighed by standards that are not mine? Can you keep your composure when your silence is interpreted through another's lens? This is not a test for you to win over others. It is a test for you not to lose yourself. My child, I know loneliness may creep in during this phase, when you do not immediately resist, yet also do not comply. You may find yourself placed in the in-between, where no one applauds, no one defends, and no one affirms. Many abandon the journey there because they cannot endure the feeling of not belonging. But listen to me, the in-between is the space of refinement. It is there that motives are purified, expectations released, and invisible bonds loosened. Do not confuse respect with blind submission. I teach you to honor the positions that are given, but I also teach you to discern when a position oversteps its boundary. When authority seeks to enter sacred territory, the realm of conscience, faith, and identity, you must hold your ground. Silence, shaped by discernment, carries more power than argument, and steadiness speaks more convincingly than any defense. My child, there are times when invisible pressure will test you by reversing language itself. What is right is labeled rigid. What is faithful is called inflexible. What is steadfast is interpreted as pride. Do not rush to correct yourself according to those labels. Return instead to a deeper standard. What keeps your soul in life? What draws you closer to me? What pulls you away from the center of peace? Those answers do not come from the crowd. They come from listening. The encounter with authority is not meant to crush you, but to reveal the structure of your inner life. If you allow pressure to define your worth, you will become fragile. But if you allow my presence to anchor your identity, you will stand firm without needing to prove anything. There is a quiet strength that flows from a person who is not pulled off course by external scrutiny, the strength of one who knows before whom they stand. When you sense invisible pressure drawing near, slow down inwardly. Keep your hands open. Do not clutch your rights. Do not push away the challenge. Allow me to steady your breathing, so that peace does not come from everything being calm, but from being rightly positioned. I will teach you how to stand before authority without being absorbed by it, how to listen without being manipulated, and how to walk forward without dropping your light. Remember, this first collision is not the destination. It is a threshold. Beyond it, you will learn to stand in truth without applause, to remain tender without losing alignment, and to move forward without carrying the weight of approval. Trust that I am present in every detail, every glance, every pause, and when you hold your boundaries in love and clarity, invisible pressure will lose its power to shape you. My child, after you have heard the call to move and have felt the pressure of unseen authority, a decisive moment will arrive, quiet, undramatic, yet heavy like a seal pressed upon the soul. That moment does not ask whether you are brave enough to confront, but whether you are faithful enough to leave. Leaving is not because you are lesser, nor because you cannot bear the pressure. You leave because you understand that there are spheres of influence that must not touch the sacred core I have placed within you. That boundary is not built with loud words, but with a quiet clarity of heart, a clarity that does not need explanation, but does require obedience. Sacred boundaries are not walls to hide from the world. They are lines that preserve life. When you fail to discern boundaries, you inadvertently allow external demands, expectations, and definitions to enter a space meant for me alone. That boundary protects not only belief, but also your capacity to listen, your capacity to love, and your ability to stand when trials increase. I do not establish boundaries to make you closed. I establish them so you will not be diluted. The decision to leave often comes in silence. It is not accompanied by public affirmation, nor secured by clear signs in the way you might expect. At times, it may even be misunderstood, misinterpreted, or seen as weakness. But do not measure the rightness of your choice by others' reactions. Measure it by the deep peace that arises when you choose what aligns with the life within. That peace does not come from having every question answered, but from your soul no longer being pulled in opposing directions. I know you may fear loss. Leaving means releasing what is familiar: connections, positions, forms of safety built over time. But understand this: not everything familiar sustains life. Some things were blessings in one season and become burdens in another. When you cling to what has completed its purpose, your hands are no longer free to receive what I am preparing. Leaving, in many cases, is the purest act of faith. This decision also reveals the clear line between obedience and compromise. Obedience often asks you to do what will not be applauded immediately. Compromise promises instant ease. But that ease is fragile and demands a long-term price: the dulling of spiritual sensitivity, the erosion of conscience, the narrowing of vision. I do not call you to the easy path. I call you to the true one. And the true path may require you to walk alone for a short stretch, so that later you may walk with those rightly positioned for the long journey. When you step out of an unsuitable sphere of influence, you do not fall into a formless void. You enter a guarded space. Even if you do not yet see what is coming, you are being set into an orbit of preparation. In that space, I will realign your rhythm, purify your motives, and strengthen what has been tested. This separation is not the end of interaction. It is the beginning of clarity. Once boundaries are established, you will begin to see everything with new eyes, not bitter, not defensive, but awake. There is a paradox you must hold. Leaving at the right time is how you preserve the ability to stay in the right place later. If you remain too long in an environment that erodes life, you will lack the strength to stand when I need you present in places that require greater endurance. Therefore, the decision to leave today is not a retreat from responsibility. It is an investment in responsibility tomorrow. I am teaching you how to steward your soul with wisdom, so that when the time comes, you will have the inner strength to carry what is greater. Remember this: sacred boundaries are not guarded by hardness of attitude, but by softness rooted in truth. You do not need to prove you are right. You only need to be faithful to what has been entrusted to you. When you leave in peace, without resentment or the need to justify yourself, you release the invisible ties that feed conflict. You walk lighter, freer, and more ready for what I will reveal next. My child, this decision also opens the door to a new kind of courage, the courage of obedient silence. Not the courage to speak more, but the courage to remain silent when words would interfere with what I am doing. not the courage to resist, but the courage to choose the right moment to withdraw. This kind of courage does not draw attention, it endures. It allows you to pass through misunderstood glances, unkind whispers, and long stretches of silence without losing faith. In those silences, I do my deepest work. When you cross a sacred boundary and choose to leave, you are closing a cycle. Closure is not a denial of what once was, it is an honoring of a lesson that has been completed. You do not need to carry every memory, every word, every emotion with you. Carry instead the wisdom that has been distilled, the humility that has been formed, and the inner freedom that has been unlocked. These are your true provisions, light yet durable, simple yet profound. I never call you to leave without going with you. When you step through the doorway of decision, I am there before you, beside you, and within you, I lead you into a new rhythm, where peace does not depend on circumstances, where identity is not threatened by scrutiny, and where you can stand upright without straining. The decision to leave today is the seed of tomorrow's stability. Sow it in trust, and you will see it take root at the appointed time. My beloved, there are movements that, once they can no longer keep you in place, shift to another strategy more subtle, quieter, and more persistent. This is the mechanism of diminishment. It does not need noise to cause harm, it only needs time and repetition. Its aim is not to bring you down instantly, but to erode you from within, little by little, until you begin to doubt what I have engraved in you. Diminishment rarely appears in rough form. It often comes dressed as concern, correction, guidance, or shared standards. It speaks in a calm tone, cites principles that sound reasonable, and subtly places you in a position where you must prove your worth. This mechanism does not attack the light you carry directly. It places that light under external standards, then measures it until the light grows dim from constant adaptation. Diminishment does not begin with insult. It begins with redefinition. When others assume the authority to define your motives, interpret your intentions, or label your choices without entering the depth where I have led you, they are operating a dangerous mechanism. For when definition is removed from the source of truth, it becomes a tool of control. And when you accept those definitions without discernment, you allow others to place their hands on your inner compass. This mechanism often feeds on comparison. It places you beside others, beside standards celebrated by society, and asks why you are not like them. It suggests that value comes from consensus, that maturity means blending in, and that difference signals poor adaptation. But remember, my child, you were not created to mirror the crowd. You were created to reflect life, and life never needs permission to exist. Diminishment also exploits weariness. After you have made difficult decisions, endured misunderstood looks, and chosen silence over self-defense, you may feel exhausted. It is then that whispers arise. Perhaps you were too rigid. Perhaps you should soften a little. Perhaps you misunderstood. These whispers are not loud, but they repeat, and repetition, if left unexamined, can become a counterfeit voice of conscience. Discern the source of the voice. The conscience I nurture always leads you toward life, even when it corrects you. The voice of diminishment, however, pulls you into a spiral of self-doubt with no exit. It offers no path forward. It only stacks question upon question until what was once clear becomes blurred. This is the sign. When you find yourself over-explaining choices that were prayed for deeply, When you feel the need to prove faithfulness through performance, stop. Truth does not need display to retain its power. Another feature of this mechanism is intentional ambiguity. It does not say you are wrong. It suggests you are not enough, not flexible enough, not fitting enough, not mature enough by their standards. And because those standards keep shifting, you remain perpetually deficient. I do not measure you by sliding scales. I measure you by the alignment between what you do and who you are when you stand before me. That alignment does not rise or fall with public opinion. It grows through faithfulness. Diminishment often borrows the language of reality. It says your ideals are too high, that the world works differently, that you must adjust to survive. But my child, reality is never meant to suffocate life. I do not call you to deny reality. I call you to enter reality with light. Where light is present, reality is transformed. Where light is dimmed, reality becomes a prison. Do not confuse wisdom with compromise. Wisdom preserves life. Compromise trades life for temporary comfort. At times, this mechanism will try to isolate you by making you feel that you are the problem. It whispers that if you changed a little, things would be smoother. If you were quieter, you would be accepted. If you shone less, you would draw less attention. My child, light is not a fault. Light does not need to apologize for illuminating. When others are unsettled by light, it is because it touches places they are not ready to face. You are not responsible for dimming yourself to make others comfortable. Remember that diminishment rarely stands alone. It is often accompanied by distortion. Fragments of truth are separated. Stories are cut short. Intentions are reframed to suit the teller. This mechanism gains strength when you respond from raw emotion. I invite you to respond with clarity. You do not need to refute every word or correct every misunderstanding. The consistency of your life will speak for you over time. Truth that is lived stands longer than truth that is argued. Child, I do not say these things to make you overly guarded, but to make you awake. Wakefulness is not suspicion of everyone. It is protection of what is essential. You can open your heart without opening your boundaries. You can listen without surrendering the authority to define. You can love without allowing life to be drained. When you hold these together, the mechanism of diminishment loses the ground it needs to operate. Diminishment has no power of its own. Its strength comes from silent agreement, when you believe your value must be confirmed from outside. When you anchor your worth in my word, that mechanism becomes powerless. It may be noisy, but ineffective, persistent, but unable to shape you. I do not call you to be unfeeling. I call you to be steady, steady enough to receive what needs correction, and steady enough to refuse what causes harm. Walk forward in this understanding. When you recognize the mechanism of diminishment, you will no longer be pulled into its spiral. You will stand in the light with humility, retain softness without losing alignment, and move ahead without carrying the burden of definitions that do not come from me. And in that steadfastness, I will continue to show you how to live beyond every attempt to shrink what I have made great within you. My beloved child, after you have recognized the mechanism of diminishment, you will begin to see another face of it, the face that wears the robe of correction. This form is more subtle, more difficult to discern, because it does not arrive in opposition, but in moral seriousness. It speaks the language of responsibility, of what is right, of the common good. It presents reasons, cites procedures, and asks you to adjust, not because you are wrong, but for the sake of improvement. It is here that many souls become ensnared, not because they are weak, but because they genuinely want to do what is right. False authority rarely imposes itself through commands, it leads through expectation. It creates an atmosphere in which compliance is praised as maturity, while discernment is labeled stubbornness. It does not say, "Change who you are," but it quietly demands a rearranging of priorities, a softening of what is essential, and a placing of the system's approval above the deep inner voice. This kind of correction does not heal, it edits the surface so the soul becomes easier to manage. Learn to distinguish between correction that flows from life and correction that arises from the need to control. Correction born of life always opens a way forward. It leads you into freedom, even if it passes through pain. Correction born of false authority always confines. It narrows choices, limits vision, and makes you dependent on approval. When being corrected leaves you feeling smaller, more fearful, more cautious about trusting your own inner voice, that is not healing. It is erosion. False authority is skillful with ambiguity. It does not clearly state what needs to change. It leaves you to guess. And when you guess, you try harder. When you try harder, you grow weary. When you are weary, you become more willing to compromise. This ambiguity keeps you trapped in a cycle of proving goodwill, proving suitability, proving that you are reasonable. But hear me. My child, truth does not require you to live in a loop of self-justification. Truth stands firm, even when it is not explained. False authority often assumes the right to judge motives. It does not only look at what you do, it interprets why you do it. It assigns intentions you do not carry, then corrects those intentions according to its own framework. When you allow others to rewrite your inner story, you hand them the most dangerous key of all. I do not forbid you from listening to feedback. I invite you to guard the authority of definition where I alone belong. False authority is also adept at making compromise look like maturity. It says you must be more realistic, more flexible, more fitting. It paints a picture of stability and promises peace if you will adjust. But my child, maturity is not trading your moral compass for smoothness. Maturity is the capacity to hold to what is right when pressure invites what is easy. Maturity is knowing when to learn and when to step back in order to preserve life. I know you may feel torn in this season. On one side is the desire for harmony, on the other is the call to remain aligned. That tension is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of growth. What matters is not whether you feel pressure, but where you place the weight of your decision. If you place it on the fear of exclusion, you will slowly shrink. If you place it on the deep peace that comes from being rightly positioned, you will stand firm even when those around you do not understand. Do not allow politeness to become silent surrender. You can show respect without handing over authority. You can listen without agreeing. You can be silent without losing your voice. Some boundaries do not need to be announced. They are kept through consistency. When you do not chase every expectation or rush to reshape yourself in response to every comment, you are sending a clear signal. Your identity is not raw material for others to mold according to their needs. False authority is often unsettled by quiet consistency. It prefers reaction, explanation, fluctuation, because these create openings for interference. When you remain steady, neither arguing nor yielding, neither attacking nor dissolving, false authority loses its leverage. It may continue to speak, but its words no longer find a place to land. This steadiness does not come from hardness, but from being deeply anchored in what you know to be true. Remember, not every correction needs to be received immediately, and not every standard is meant to be applied to you. You are allowed to ask, does this lead me toward life, Does it draw me closer to me? Does it preserve inner freedom? If the answer is no, you do not need to resist. You simply do not need to carry it. Some burdens were never assigned to you. Do not pick them up out of politeness. True authority is not threatened by light, by questions, or by difference. True authority serves life. When you encounter an authority that must make you smaller in order to stand, that authority is protecting itself, not what is right. You are not created to sustain structures built on fear. You were created to carry life into places where it is lacking. Keep your heart soft and your axis firm. Learn without trading yourself away. Walk in humility without bowing to what causes harm. When you do this, every form of correction that does not come from life will reveal itself for what it truly is, an attempt at control dressed in moral language. And you, in clarity, will continue walking lightly, freely, and faithfully with what I have placed within you, my child. When diminishment is no longer a single incident but becomes a repeating current, the question is no longer how do I respond, but how do I avoid being shaped by it. Persistent diminishment draws its strength not from truth, but from regularity. It knocks each day with small signals, a doubtful glance, a half-spoken comment, a deliberate silence, or standards adjusted at just the right moment to keep you perpetually lacking. If you do not guard your inner axis, you will slowly begin living to adjust, rather than living to remain faithful. Guarding your inner axis does not mean closing your heart. On the contrary, it is the ability to remain open without losing your center. Your inner axis is the place where you know who you are when no one agrees, where you stand firm even when external voices contradict one another. That axis is not built through resistance, but through sustained alignment with what I have spoken within you. When you return to that axis each day, diminishment loses its ability to penetrate, because it can no longer find a point of leverage. Understand this: persistent diminishment often targets rhythm. It does not need to convince you that you are wrong. It only needs to make you tired. When you are tired, discernment weakens. When you are tired, you accept things you would once have refused. Therefore, guarding your inner axis also means guarding your rest. Rest is not avoidance, it is realignment. In stillness, you remember why you began. In quietness, you hear again what I spoke before the noise arrived. My beloved child, persistent diminishment also seeks to occupy your inner language. It wants you to speak to yourself in its voice, the voice of lack, of doubt, of self-blame. When you begin to lower yourself with words that others have planted, that mechanism has already achieved half of its goal. Therefore, you must guard the words you speak within your own heart. Replace questions that shrink you with questions that lead you back to life. Does this draw me away from the center of peace? Does this require me to trade what I have entrusted to you? These questions do not condemn, they illuminate. Moral posture is not maintained by perfection, but by consistency. Consistency in how you love when tested. Consistency in how you speak truth without wounding. Consistency in how you refuse what distorts alignment, even when that refusal is misunderstood. This posture is not loud. It quietly generates a field of influence. Others may disagree with you, but they will find it difficult to deny the steadiness that emanates from your life. At times, persistent diminishment will try to pull you into the game of reaction, pushing you to prove yourself, to justify, to argue without end. But, my child, truth does not need a stage. When you are drawn into constant reaction, you allow another rhythm to govern you. I invite you to choose a different rhythm, the rhythm of composure. Composure is not passivity. It is the strength that knows when to speak and when to remain silent in order to preserve life. Guarding your inner axis also requires learning to distinguish between loneliness and consecrated separation. Loneliness causes you to fold inward. Separation preserves you. When diminishment places you on the margins, you may feel abandoned. But, my child, there are seasons when I allow you to enter separation so that I may strengthen you without interference. In that separation, you learn to rely on presence rather than affirmation, to stand firm without needing a crowd. Remember that persistent diminishment is not always a sign that you are on the wrong path. Often, it is a sign that you are on the right one. Steady light exposes structures that do not wish to be illuminated. Yet do not allow this awareness to turn into pride. Keep your heart humble, humble enough to receive what needs correction, and humble enough to refuse bitterness. Bitterness is what diminishment hopes to leave behind. Do not give it that reward. When you guard your inner axis, you also retain the freedom to choose your responses. You can choose not to answer every word. You can choose not to explain every action. That freedom is the fruit of anchoring yourself in an unchanging source. When your source is steady, external currents lose their power to carry you away. You stand within life with a softness that has structure, a combination no false authority can comprehend. Persistent diminishment can only make you smaller if you forget before whom you stand. When you remember, you will stand upright without strain, walk without haste, and love without compromise. Your inner axis is set in what is eternal. Your moral posture is anchored in life. No word can drain it. No pressure can distort it. And no passage of time can fade what I have engraved. Continue to walk in this clarity. Diminishment will come and go. A guarded inner axis will remain. And as you move into the seasons ahead, you will carry a quiet strength, the strength of one who has learned to stand firm amid attempts to shrink the light, and who still chooses to live in the freedom that only truth can give. Child, when you have preserved your inner axis through persistent efforts of diminishment, you will begin to notice another movement at work, not to erode, but to refine. It is the fire. This fire does not come to consume you, nor to expose you to human judgment. It comes to reveal what is true, to separate light from mixture, and to engrave identity into what cannot be shaken. This fire is not loud, it is smoldering, steady, and precise. It touches depths that words cannot reach, the places where motives dwell and where choices are formed before actions ever appear. You may have grown accustomed to being evaluated by surface things, outcomes, reactions, or appearances. But refining fire has no interest in the surface. It goes straight to the core. It does not ask what you have done, but from where you have done it. It does not measure performance. It measures alignment. In the fire, the things that once helped you survive previous seasons, defensive layers, self-protective habits, adaptive strategies will be tested, not because they are wrong, but because they are no longer needed for the season ahead. My beloved child, the refining fire is never separated from love. Love does not soften the fire, love directs the fire. So when you feel pressure increasing, when questions become sharper, when choices grow so clear that there is no longer room for ambiguity, do not rush to conclude that you are under threat. There are moments when clarity comes through fire, and that clarity is a gift because it frees you from burdens you were never meant to carry. In the fire, true light does not need to put on a display. It appears naturally. Like metal, once impurities have been removed, you will find that what was once doubted misunderstood, or diminished now becomes clear, not through defense, but through consistency. True light does not argue, it persuades by presence. When the fire is at work, false structures, no matter how refined, cannot endure, because they lack the depth required to withstand heat. The refining fire also tests the way you love. Love in the fire no longer depends on response or agreement. It is rooted in freedom. You love without needing recognition. Speak truth without needing to win. And keep your heart soft without losing alignment. This kind of love cannot be manipulated, because it does not seek reward. And it is precisely this love that exposes the difference between true authority and false authority, between leadership that serves life and control that serves fear. There will be moments in the fire when everything feels narrowed, fewer options, a clearer path, and a more tangible cost. Do not fear this narrowing. Narrowing is not loss. Narrowing is purification. When paths that do not belong to you are closed, you are freed from distraction. When choices that do not resonate are removed, your inner energy becomes focused. And in that focus, strength is born. The refining fire also touches memory. It brings old experiences to the surface, times you were misjudged, imposed upon, or chose silence in order to survive. Not so that you relive the pain, but so that you may release the residue it left behind. Memories brought into the light lose their power to govern. When you look back with new understanding, you no longer react from old wounds. You respond from present clarity. That is freedom. In the fire, you also learn to distinguish between impulsiveness and zeal. Impulsiveness flares quickly and fades quickly. Zeal burns steadily and sustains life. The refining fire does not provoke you, it matures you. It teaches you to slow down to become more precise, to speak less in order to be clearer, and to walk more firmly so you do not have to turn back. This is wisdom forged under pressure, not flashy, but trustworthy. Do not expect the fire to end quickly. Refinement is not measured by time, but by depth. Some layers need time to melt, not because you resist, but because they have been attached for so long. Be patient with the process. Patience is not passivity, it is cooperation. When you cooperate with the fire, neither running from it nor fighting it, you will find that with each passing day, you become lighter, clearer, and freer. Remember this. My child, the refining fire does not take away what is true. It restores what is true. It does not weaken you. It makes you precise. It does not steal joy. It purifies joy. When you come out of this season, you will carry a light that is not loud, but enduring, the light of one who has passed through fire and no longer needs to prove anything. And that light will guide the seasons ahead, where life is entrusted more deeply, responsibility is expanded, and freedom is lived more fully. My beloved, when the fire has begun to reveal true light, it does not stop at exposure, it continues into purification. At this deeper level, the fire no longer turns outward to distinguish what is true from what is false, but inward to refine motives. There are things you once did with sincere intention, yet those intentions became mixed with the need for recognition, the fear of exclusion, or the memory of having to protect yourself. The fire does not accuse you for these mixtures, it simply separates them, so that what is pure may breathe freely. You will come to see that motive is the source of vision. When motives are clouded, vision becomes misaligned, not necessarily wrong, but shallow. The fire does its quiet work. It peels away overlapping desires and brings you face to face with the foundational question you must answer before me. What are you truly seeking? when that question is answered with honesty. Your vision is no longer driven by immediate pressure. It is guided by long-term purpose. This is the shift from reaction to direction. Child. The refining fire does not only clarify what you desire, it also clarifies what you are willing to release. Some goals once propelled you forward but have now become burdens. Some images you once pursued no longer sustain life. The fire helps you let go without regret, because you understand that letting go is not loss. It is the release of energy for what is more fitting. When what is unnecessary falls away, what is essential stands firm. In this process, your vision will expand in an unusual way. It does not expand by seeing more, but by seeing deeper. You begin to recognize patterns beneath the surface, the motives behind words, the fear behind power, and the lack beneath control. This understanding does not make you cynical, it makes you compassionate without being naive. You love with discernment, without handing over the authority to define what does not come from me. The fire also teaches you a crucial lesson about timing. There are truths that are right but spoken at the wrong moment, actions that are necessary but not yet. When motives are refined, you no longer rush to prove yourself. You learn to wait in peace, knowing that true vision requires the right rhythm. This waiting is not delay, it is alignment. And in that alignment, doors open not by your force, but by the agreement of time. In the fire, you will also clearly see the boundary between zeal and ambition. Zeal is born from life and serves life. Ambition seeks to seize outcomes to validate the self. The fire reveals this difference by placing you before choices with no immediate reward. When you choose what is right without being seen, your motives are purified. And when motives are purified, vision becomes steady, no longer swayed by praise or criticism. This refinement also reshapes how you understand success. Success is no longer measured by speed or scale, but by faithfulness and lasting impact. You begin to value small steps taken in the right direction more than large steps taken off alignment. In this new vision, you see that what I do often begins quietly, taking root in shadow before blooming in light. And you are willing to walk with that process because you have learned how to trust. The refining fire also helps you distinguish between responsibility and self-imposed burden. Responsibility flows from assignment, burden flows from the fear of disappointing others. When motives are purified, you no longer take on everything to prove yourself. You receive what is entrusted to you and lay down what is not yours to carry. This lightness does not make you less committed. It makes you more precise in your commitment. And that precision guards you from exhaustion. As vision expands, you will see the road ahead more clearly, not every turn, but the direction. This direction is not governed by short-term fluctuation. It is anchored in what endures. You walk with the humility of one who knows there is still much to learn, and the steadiness of one who knows where they stand. This is maturity forged in fire, not loud, not defensive, but rich with inner authority. Engrave this truth within you. The fire purifies motives in order to release vision, and vision is released in order to serve life. When you step out of this season, you will see the world with clearer eyes and a steadier heart. You will act not because you need to prove yourself, but because you know you have been entrusted. And in that knowing, you will walk lightly, unpulled by pressure, unbound by expectation, moving forward with a ripened clarity. My beloved, when the fire has completed its refining work, when motives have been purified and vision has widened, something new will emerge. Quiet yet profound inner freedom. This is not a momentary rush, nor a fleeting relief after pressure eases. Inner freedom is a durable state, where you are no longer governed by fear, no longer pulled off course by expectations, and no longer living in reaction to the gaze of others. It is the freedom of one who knows where they belong, what foundation they stand upon, and the direction in which they are walking. This freedom does not separate you from the world. It allows you to be present within it without being consumed by it. You work, you love, you face what must be faced, and you decide, but without carrying the burden of needing approval. When approval is no longer the motive, your actions become pure. You do not speak to be heard, you speak when it is time to speak. You do not remain silent out of fear, you remain silent out of wisdom. Your rhythm of life is no longer imposed from the outside, it is guided by inner alignment. Inner freedom also carries a new kind of calm. This calm does not come from everything going smoothly, but from no longer losing yourself when things do not. When misunderstandings arise, you do not rush to repair your image. When you are misjudged, you do not scramble to defend yourself. You know that mature light does not need words to protect it. It is protected by consistency. And that very consistency dissolves attempts to create confusion. Mature light is not dazzling, it is steady. It does not seek a stage, it creates safe space. As you walk in inner freedom, others will sense it not through teaching, but through presence. They will see a life not driven by competition, not bound by criticism, and not paralyzed by fear of loss. That light does not force change, it invites through life. My child, there is a deep paradox here. When you stop trying to lead, you begin to lead, not by authority, but by example. Others may not agree with your choices, but they will find it difficult to deny the peace that flows from you. In a world saturated with pressure and comparison, that peace becomes a sign. It opens conversations without defensiveness, sincere questions, and moments of mutual learning. Mature light does not argue to win, it illuminates so that seeing becomes possible. Inner freedom also releases you from harshness toward yourself. You no longer measure your worth by performance or immediate results. You allow yourself to learn, adjust, and grow without self-condemnation. Kindness toward yourself does not lower standards. It enables you to keep standards without burning out. When you are no longer at war with yourself, that energy is transformed into creativity and service. Remember, mature light is also revealed in how you face conflict. You do not avoid it, but you do not amplify it. You enter conflict to bring clarity, not to cause harm. You speak truth without wounding, because you do not need to win in order to know you are right. This freedom makes you flexible without losing alignment, knowing when to yield and when to stand. That is authority without coercion. There will be times when your light makes others uncomfortable, not because you are wrong, but because your stability reflects their unrest. Remember this, you are not responsible for others' reactions to the light. You are responsible only for keeping the light pure. Pure does not mean perfect. Pure means unmixed motive. When you keep that, the light will do its work in ways you cannot control. Influence arises from presence. Control requires pressure. When you live in freedom, you do not need to pull anyone along. You allow them to walk with you if they choose. This protects you from carrying responsibilities that were never entrusted to you, and it protects others from dependence. Mature light does not cast the shadow of reliance. It creates space for each person to stand. In this season, you will find that many doors open not because you knock harder, but because you arrive at the right time. That timing is recognized by the peace that accompanies it, not by a sense of forced urgency. You learn to say not yet without fear of missing out, and to say yes without strain. Inner freedom gives you the capacity to choose with clarity, untouched by false urgency. Mature light also carries new responsibility, not the responsibility to shine more, but the responsibility to be more faithful, faithful to what has been entrusted, to the rhythm that has been set, and to the boundaries that have been established. As you keep that faithfulness, your light will continue to grow naturally. It will reach those seeking stability, support those who are weary, and illuminate the way for those who are undecided, not by command, but by life. Remember that inner freedom is not a fixed destination. It is a state nurtured day by day. There will be days when you must return, remember, and realign. That is not regression, it is wakefulness. As you continue to cultivate this freedom through listening, through rest, and through faithfulness, mature light will not fade. It will become the foundation for seasons to come, seasons where responsibility expands, influence spreads, and life is entrusted more deeply. My beloved child, you have passed through the fire and stepped into freedom. Carry this light with you, not as a torch for display, but as a lamp to guide the way. And as you continue walking, you will discover that inner freedom is not only a gift for you alone, it becomes a quiet invitation to those who are searching for a steady path in a world full of upheaval. Beloved, when mature light has settled within you, another experience will appear, not to weaken you, but to protect what I am building. It is isolation. Do not rush to fear it or misunderstand it. The isolation I allow is not abandonment. It is an invisible fortress. It does not shut you away from life. It keeps life from being diluted. In this season, you will notice familiar circles thinning, voices that were once loud growing quiet, and doors that once opened easily becoming selective. This is not a sign of diminished worth, it is a sign of reinforced foundations. Sacred isolation does not come through forced separation, but through a shift in resonance. You no longer vibrate with what once pulled you into cycles of proving. You no longer feel compelled to be everywhere in order to be seen. Your inner rhythm slows, becoming more precise, more grounded, more deep. And as the rhythm changes, connections that no longer share the same tempo naturally drift away. This needs no explanation. It needs peaceful acceptance. You do not owe anyone your presence in a rhythm that has already completed its assignment. The invisible fortress is built through intentional silence. This silence is not fear-driven withdrawal or disappointment-induced retreat. It is the silence of one who knows they are being guarded. Within this silence, I strengthen what has been refined, re-center you for responsibilities that are approaching, and clarify the boundaries needed so you are not pulled back into old trajectories. This silence filters out noise so that the true voice, the voice of life, can be heard more clearly. At times, you may feel as though you are standing on the margins of major movements. Conversations happen without you. Decisions are made without your input. Do not rush to interpret this as exclusion. In many cases, it is protection. Not every movement requires your involvement. Not every decision belongs to you. The invisible fortress preserves your inner energy from being scattered, so that when the moment comes, you have strength for what truly matters. Isolation is also where I teach you to discern the difference between presence and readiness. You can be present without being ready. You can also be ready without being present everywhere. Readiness is cultivated in quiet, where motives are examined. Vision is aligned, and courage is gathered without an audience. When you step out of this invisible fortress, you will not need time to catch up. you will step directly into a rhythm that has already been prepared. The invisible fortress also protects you from a subtle temptation, the temptation to use light to attract. When mature light emerges, it carries a natural draw. But I do not want you to live by that attraction. I want you to live by faithfulness. Isolation places you outside the cycle of attention, so you can learn to shine without relying on feedback. When light no longer needs an audience, it becomes pure, and pure light endures. In this season, you will find yourself speaking less, but listening more, listening not only with your ears, but with discernment. You will read the atmosphere before the words, sense intention before action appears. This sensitivity is not meant to make you suspicious, it is meant to help you choose wisely. The invisible fortress does not close you off, it refines you, refining where you place your time, your trust, and your commitment. You may be misunderstood as distant, cold, or difficult to approach. Let those misunderstandings pass. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Many dissolve when timing shifts. You do not need to make yourself smaller to be understood. You need to keep yourself whole to remain faithful. When you stand firm in this, those who are aligned in rhythm will find you not through noise, but through recognition. The invisible fortress is also where I heal accumulated weariness, unnamed fatigue, prolonged tension, vigilance that was once necessary. Here, these burdens are laid down. Under this covering, you learn to trust again, to trust guidance, to trust timing, to trust that you do not need to control in order to be safe. This rest does not slow you down, it makes you more precise. Do not be surprised if, during this time, I limit the information that reaches you. This is not to keep you uninformed, but to keep you from being overloaded. Some knowledge, received too early, does not prepare you better, it only creates anxiety. The invisible fortress keeps your mind clear and light, so that when what you need to know arrives, you receive it with peace, not panic. I am teaching you trust not by giving you every detail, but by giving you my presence. Cherish this isolation as a gift. It will not last forever, but it will last long enough to do its work. When you step out, you will carry a new stability, one that does not depend on crowds, is not driven by urgency, and is not shaken by noise. The invisible fortress will have fulfilled its purpose, protecting the light so the light can serve without being worn down. You are not walking through this season alone. I am there in the silence, in your breathing, in the wordless peace. When you are within the invisible fortress, you are not separated from me, you are held closer to me. Rest, my child. This rest is preparing you for clearer steps, broader responsibilities, and relationships that will be rightly placed in the season ahead. My beloved child, there will be times when isolation does not come merely as a chosen quietness, but as the experience of being pushed to the margins of being excluded. It is not always overt. Sometimes it shows up in the gaps where invitations used to be, in the absence of your name from plans, in the subtle shift of tone when people speak about you. You will feel it like a cold current moving through your heart. I no longer belong here. But, my child, do not confuse being excluded by people with being cut off from life. Doors may be closed to you by systems, but you can never be closed off from me. There is a hidden mystery in exclusion that you must understand. The world often uses it as punishment, as a way to discourage you into adjusting yourself. But in my hands, exclusion becomes a separation. It separates you from circles that exist only by consensus, from connections that keep you on the surface, from places that require you to trade light for acceptance. I do not cause human cruelty, but I can use its consequences to free you from what no longer fits. What makes exclusion painful is not only the loss of position, but the feeling of being misunderstood. You may have tried to live uprightly, to do what is right, to remain kind, and yet you are set aside as though you were the problem. In that moment, the greatest temptation is to fix your image, to do something to be let back in, to say something to be understood. But I want you to slow down, for there are doors I do not want you knocking on again, not because you are lacking, but because those places no longer have the capacity to hold what I am forming in you. Exclusion often forces you to face a deeper question: to which belonging are you living? If your sense of belonging rests on approval, exclusion will crush you. But if your belonging is anchored in me, you will feel pain, yes, but you will not break. Pain, because you still know how to love, to value, to hope, but not break. Because your identity is not held in their hands. This, my child, is quiet maturity, the ability to endure pain without losing light. I also want you to understand that exclusion is often a sign of a changing season. When seasons shift, old structures no longer fit. Relationships that supported you in earlier stages may not be able to walk with you into deeper ones. And when you do not leave on your own, exclusion sometimes becomes the way life pushes you forward. Do not hold on to bitterness. Bitterness will trap you in what has already passed. Let pain become growth. Let loss become renewal. The greatest danger in exclusion is that it tries to turn you into a self-protective version of yourself. It wants you to shrink back, distrust everyone, harden your heart. But I do not call you to become cold. I call you to become luminous. There is a difference between boundaries and walls. Boundaries protect life. Walls block life. Exclusion can teach you about boundaries, but do not let it teach you to close yourself off. Keep your heart soft toward me, soft toward truth, even if you no longer believe every word easily. In this season, you will learn a new kind of courage, the courage not to chase acceptance. Invitations to return may come, but with conditions. If you change this a little, if you soften that, if you stop speaking that way, my child, discern carefully. Not every invitation back is restoration. Often it is an attempt to regain control. True restoration does not require you to trade away your core. True restoration expands life. It does not shrink it. I know you may look around and see fewer allies. Those who once laughed with you may grow silent. Those who once stood close may step away. This is when you must remember you are not being cut off. You are being reconnected. Some connections are released to make room for those aligned with your true rhythm. But before new connections arrive, I draw you closer to me so that you do not enter new relationships hungry for approval, but full from within. In exclusion, you will learn how to stand without proving yourself. You will learn how to walk without explaining yourself. You will learn how to do what is right, even when no one calls it right. These lessons are not glamorous, but they create endurance. That endurance will become the foundation for seasons when your voice must be clearer and carry further. If you do not learn to stand when you are excluded, it will be difficult to stand when you are noticed, because attention also carries pressure. The pressure to meet expectations, the pressure to maintain an image. I am preparing you for both. Child, let me lead you through exclusion with peace. Peace does not deny pain. Peace places pain where it belongs. You may cry, sigh, feel empty. I do not see that as failure. I see it as proof that you are still alive and real, and even in moments of emptiness, I am filling you with something else, a certainty that does not depend on human agreement. Remember, this exclusion has no authority to write the final chapter. It is only a transition. It is like a field being plowed. The surface looks chaotic, but it is preparation for new seed. You are in a plowed season not to diminish you, but to bring forth something more enduring. Stay within my leading. Do not rush to find a new place out of fear. Let the right place find you at the appointed time according to my design. My child, there will be an even subtler phase of isolation when you are not only pushed to the margins, but your voice seems to be silenced, not because you have nothing to say, but because every door for speaking is closed. When you speak, you are overlooked. What you offer is no longer acknowledged. Thoughts that were once welcomed now fall into emptiness. This silence is not accidental. It is part of the invisible fortress, not to make you invisible, but to forge your authority in a way that cannot be formed while echoes still surround you. Forced silence is the most uncomfortable test for those who carry light. For light, by nature, longs to shine. But, my child, shining does not always mean speaking. There are seasons when light is asked to remain in presence rather than in words. I am not muting you. I am teaching you to discern between a necessary voice and a timely voice. In that discernment, mature authority is formed not from how often you speak, but from the weight your words carry when they are finally released. When your voice is constrained, the greatest temptation is either to speak louder or to withdraw completely. Speaking louder easily becomes a reaction. Withdrawing completely easily becomes bitterness. I invite you to a third way: remain in presence. Keep peace, and allow your words to ripen. Ripened words do not need volume, they need timing. And timing cannot be manufactured, it is recognized through listening. My beloved child, this silence exposes the deepest motives. Why do you want to speak? To be recognized, or to serve life? When the door of recognition closes, motives are purified. You learn to speak first to me. In those conversations without an audience, I refine your tone, sharpen your intention, and distill what is essential. There are words you once wanted to say, but spoken too early, they would wound more than heal. There are truths that must be carried in silence, so that, when they are finally spoken, they bear authority, not merely correctness. The constriction of your voice also teaches you to recognize authority that needs no microphone. You begin to see that influence often operates beneath the surface through how you live, how you choose, how you refrain from reacting. When you keep peace while being overlooked, you send a message stronger than words. You are not governed by attention. That message reaches those who watch from a distance, those who learn by seeing more than by hearing. There are systems that do not fear words, but fear steady presence. Words can be debated, presence is harder to deny. When you stand with stability without defensiveness, without pleading, without attack, you expose the insecurity of structures that depend on control. In that moment, your silence becomes a mirror, not to shame anyone, but to allow truth to reflect itself. I know you may worry that if you do not speak, the truth will be distorted. But, my child, truth does not depend on your voice to exist. There are times when truth is best protected by the consistency of a lived life. When you live what you believe, false narratives gradually lose their power, not in a day, but over time. Time becomes an ally of truth when truth is lived, not merely spoken. Silence also teaches you the art of stepping out at the right moment. Some doors close not to keep you inside forever, but to prevent you from stepping out too soon. When I open them, you will know not by applause, but by the peace that accompanies it. When you emerge from silence with words that have ripened, those words will not need defense. They will stand because they were born from deep listening, not quick reaction. Do not fear being misunderstood in this season. Misunderstanding does not diminish true authority. Often, it protects authority from premature use. If you are understood too quickly, you may be pulled into expectations that do not belong to you. The invisible fortress shields you from invitations that would pull you off alignment calls to use your voice for purposes that do not serve life. While you remain in silence, I am doing a parallel work. I am preparing ears to hear. Not every ear is ready at the same time. Some need time to shed bias, to grow weary of noise, to hunger for clarity. When they are ready, your words will meet their place, and then you will not need to persuade. The meeting itself will carry authority. Keep peace in this season of constrained voices. Peace is not resignation. Peace is knowing you are rightly positioned within the process. You are not forgotten. You are being placed in depth, and depth always precedes resonance. When you emerge from that depth, your voice will carry the weight of the silence you have passed through, a weight that cannot be fabricated. The invisible fortress does not keep you silent forever. It keeps you for the right time, and when that time comes, you will speak not more, but truer, not louder, but deeper. Mature authority will not need to compete for space. Space will be yielded to it by the very life it carries. My beloved, after you have passed through the invisible fortress through isolation, through exclusion, through constrained silence, an inner door will open. That door does not lead to prominence. It leads to freedom. This is a freedom few ever touch, because it does not come from being accepted, but from no longer needing recognition. When this door opens, you will realize that the heaviest burden you once carried was not hardship or pressure, but the quiet longing to be seen, affirmed, acknowledged. The need for recognition can disguise itself skillfully. It does not always appear as pride. Often it wears the clothing of responsibility, goodwill, and the desire to contribute. You may say you only want to do what is right, to add value, to avoid being misunderstood. But, my child, when the deepest motive still needs a confirming gaze to feel worthy, the soul is not yet free. True freedom begins when you do what is right, even when no one knows, no one applauds, and no one remembers. I do not fault you for having longed to be recognized. That longing is human. But I invite you beyond what is merely human. I invite you into a place where your value does not rise and fall with response, where your identity does not tremble with approval, and where your peace is not stolen by another's indifference. When you enter this place, many reactions that once governed you will fall silent. You will no longer need to over-explain. You will no longer have to prove you are not wrong. You will no longer chase shifting standards to keep your footing. My child, the need for recognition often keeps you living in a subtle state of defensiveness. You speak a little, but hold a little back. You do something, then watch for the reaction in order to adjust to the next step. You are not being dishonest, you are simply adapting in order to survive. Yet that kind of survival is exhausting, because it requires you to constantly read the atmosphere, guess the intentions of others, and calculate every move. When I free you from the need to be recognized, I also free you from this weary way of living. You begin to live from the center, not from the edges. This freedom does not make you indifferent or careless. On the contrary, it makes you more authentic. You no longer need to display yourself to be seen, nor to shrink yourself to feel safe. You can be fully present with joy, with seriousness, with clear boundaries, without fearing the loss of approval. You understand that some people will understand you and some will not. And this is no longer a threat to your soul, because you no longer place your inner life in their hands. When you are freed from the need for recognition, you will see something profound. Many relationships in the past were sustained by an unspoken exchange. I give you attention. You give me conformity. When you no longer participate in that exchange, some connections will naturally dissolve. This can be painful, but it is healthy. It makes room for relationships that are not built on performance, but on truth. These relationships may not be many, but they are durable. Not loud, but deep. I also want you to see that the need for recognition often makes you fear being misunderstood more than you fear being wrong. When misunderstanding comes, you panic because your image feels threatened. But when you are free, misunderstanding no longer has the same power. You still care about truth, but you are no longer obsessed with whether everyone understands you correctly. You know that truth, when lived long enough, will reveal itself. And if some people never understand, you do not lose yourself because of it. Freedom from the need for recognition also changes how you receive praise and criticism. Praise no longer inflates you excessively. Criticism no longer collapses you. Both pass through you without staying to define you. You listen in order to learn, not in order to determine your worth. You keep what helps you grow and release what merely reflects another person's emotions. This is the mark of a soul that has been firmly anchored. In this state of freedom, you will find yourself acting less out of pressure and more out of stewardship. You no longer ask, "Will this make me seen?" but instead ask, "Is this faithful to what I have been entrusted with?" That question is simple, yet liberating. It cuts off many old cycles. It allows you to say no without long explanations, and to say yes without carrying the burden of having to prove yourself. There is a beautiful paradox in this freedom. When you no longer need recognition, you become more trustworthy. You cannot be bought by praise, nor intimidated by exclusion. You can stand in difficult places, speak uncomfortable truths, and remain kind without compromise. Your authority does not come from how many support you, but from the fact that you are not governed by the crowd. Know this freedom does not make you lonelier, it makes you more discerning. You no longer seek closeness at any cost, you seek resonance. And true resonance only happens when neither side needs to perform. When you live free from the need for recognition, you invite others into freedom as well, not by proclamation, but by the way you live. Cherish this freedom, for it does not come easily. It is purchased through seasons of silence, moments of misunderstanding, and times of standing alone without running away. Precisely because of this, it is enduring. It is not swept away by changing circumstances. It is not stolen by a single word of criticism. It stays with you as a new foundation, a place where you can stand upright, breathe deeply, and walk lightly in a demanding world. From this foundation, what comes next will unfold a way of living that is not dependent, an influence that does not coerce, and a form of service that does not exhaust. But before you go further, remain here a little while in this freedom. Let it soak into how you think, how you speak, how you choose. For when you are truly free from the need for recognition, You have entered a territory where very little in this world can still control you. My beloved, when you have entered freedom from the need for recognition, a new question will slowly emerge, not in words, but through lived experience. How do you continue to live and serve without falling back into the trap of expectation and achievement? This question is not meant to make you anxious. It is meant to help you protect what you have just received. For freedom, once tasted, must be guarded by attentiveness, not by strain. Living from freedom does not mean disengaging. On the contrary, your engagement becomes purer. You no longer act out of fear of judgment, nor to accumulate an image. You act because life flowing through you seeks expression. When that becomes the source, you no longer need to push yourself beyond your capacity. You only need to be faithful to the rhythm that has been given to you. This rhythm is neither frantic nor stagnant. It is fitting, and what is fitting always carries peace. The trap of expectation often returns disguised as greater responsibility. When you are free and reliable, others will offer you more tasks, more roles, more invitations. Not all of these are wrong, but not all of them are yours. The difference lies here: what draws you deeper into life, and what pulls you back into the cycle of proving yourself. When you take on too much out of fear of disappointing others, freedom begins to thin. When you choose selectively out of faithfulness to your inner axis, freedom is strengthened. Living from freedom requires learning the art of saying no without guilt. This no is not a rejection of others, it is the protection of what has been entrusted to you. Each time you say no in the right place, you are saying yes to something deeper. And each time you say yes out of fear of missing out, you hand your freedom over to something that does not nourish life. Remember this: not every opportunity is a door. Many are merely detours that scatter your focus. My beloved child, achievement, too, can be a subtle trap. Achievement in itself is not wrong. The danger comes when it becomes the measure of your identity. When you begin to ask, "Do I still have worth if I do not produce this result?" that is the moment freedom is threatened. I invite you back to the foundational question: can you remain faithful when no one sees immediate results? Faithfulness is the enduring measure. Achievement is only a seasonal outcome. Serving from freedom also transforms the way you see others. You no longer serve in order to be loved. You serve because you already know you are loved. This difference changes the quality of every interaction. You do not cling to feedback, nor are you deeply wounded when feedback is absent. You give without keeping a ledger of debts, and because you keep no ledger, you do not run dry. Service that flows from freedom does not exhaust you, it animates you. Pay attention to the early warning signs when freedom is being threatened. It is when you begin to compare, not to learn, but to measure your worth. It is when you feel the need to post more, explain more, or display more in order to feel that you are doing it right. It is when joy turns into pressure and rest begins to feel like guilt. These signs are not meant to condemn you. They are invitations to return. Return to the axis. Return to the rhythm. Return to the source. Living from freedom also teaches you how to accept limitations. You no longer see limits as failure, but as guidance. Limits tell you when to stop, when to wait, when to shift. In a world that glorifies overload, the one who knows how to stop at the right time is the strong one. For stopping is not quitting. Stopping is preserving yourself so that you can go farther. When you honor limits, you honor the life within you. Another temptation of achievement is to equate value with busyness. But busyness is not the same as effectiveness, and effectiveness is not the same as faithfulness. I do not call you to fill your schedule, I call you to fill your purpose. There are days when you do very little, yet touch very deeply. There are seasons when you sow but do not yet reap. If you measure yourself only by what you can see, you will miss the quiet work that is unfolding. Freedom enables you to trust the process even when there is no immediate evidence. Serving from freedom also makes you gentler with others. You no longer place upon them the expectations you once placed upon yourself. You do not use your own standards to measure their pace. You understand that each person has their own rhythm, their own season, their own lessons. This patience does not make you permissive, it makes you compassionate. And compassion, when not mixed with a need to control, becomes a safe environment for growth. Keep the simple joy alive. Joy does not come from playing the role correctly, but from living on the right axis. When you laugh without needing an audience, when you rest without needing to justify yourself, when you work with full presence instead of anxiety about outcomes, these are signs that freedom is at work. This joy is not loud, it is enduring. It does not depend on smooth circumstances, it stands firm amid change. Do not forget, freedom is not maintained by willpower, but by connection. Connection to the source that set you free. Each day, you must return not to start over, but to realign. Realign your motives. Realign your rhythm of life. Realign what you receive and what you give. When you keep this practice of alignment, expectations lose their pull. Achievement returns to its proper place, and service continues to flow without draining you. Living and serving from freedom is an art learned over a lifetime, but you do not learn it alone. I am there reminding you when you forget, holding you when you are weary, and guiding you when you are unsure. Keep walking lightly. Freedom does not need to prove itself, it only needs to be lived. And when you live it fully, you will see that your service does not merely bring benefit, it brings life. My beloved, when you have learned to live and serve from freedom, no longer bound by expectations or achievements, you will enter a more subtle movement. Freedom itself becomes the foundation of true influence. This is not influence built on position or reputation, but on steady presence. You do not need to attract attention, you are recognized. You do not need to prove yourself, you are trusted. This kind of influence does not seek space, it creates space for life to grow. True influence does not operate through pressure, but through the sense of safety others feel in your presence. They find in you an anchor, not because you have every answer, but because you do not panic in the face of questions. Your inner freedom calms the turbulence around you. In a world that reacts quickly and judges hastily, your steadiness becomes a quiet invitation. Slow down. Breathe. Return to the center. You influence not by command, but by a rhythm of breathing that is rightly placed. You offer influence the way one offers a lamp to help others see the path, not to make them walk in your shadow. You honor each person's unique journey. You do not force them to grow faster than their capacity. You do not pull them into your own rhythm. True influence does not create dependence. It awakens personal responsibility. And when others stand firmly on their own feet, your influence has fulfilled its purpose. Freedom also helps you distinguish between being heard and being obeyed. You do not need obedience in order to feel valuable. You speak when it is time to speak, and you allow your words to find their own way. Some words you speak will be received immediately. Others will need time to sink in. You do not monitor the outcome of your words. You remain faithful to their truth. When you are not attached to a response, your words are light yet deep, free of coercion, free of defensive sharpness. When freedom leads, you are not afraid to share authority. You do not cling to roles in order to protect your position. You know that power held by fear impoverishes the environment, while power shared in trust enriches life. You are willing to step back when needed, lift others up at the right moment, and stand in a posture of service without becoming small. This is the paradox of freedom. The less you grasp, the more you are able to support. Influence grounded in freedom also makes you resilient in times of change. When contexts shift, you do not panic, because your identity is not tied to a single structure. You can change roles without losing yourself, adapt methods without betraying your purpose. This flexibility does not come from a lack of commitment. It comes from commitment to something more enduring than any structure. A free person can adapt without dissolving. My beloved child, there will be times when you realize that your influence spreads most powerfully when you are not paying attention to it. A word spoken at the right moment, a faithful presence, a decision to stay aligned. These sow seeds you may not see right away. Do not demand an immediate harvest. The seeds of life often germinate in the shade, and when they bloom, you may already be in another season. That does not diminish your work. It proves that the work was never dependent on you. Freedom also helps you remain humble in the midst of influence. When others come to you, listen to you, or ask you to lead, you do not confuse role with worth. You know you are still someone who is learning, still being guided, still needing daily realignment. This humility does not make you hesitant. It makes you safe for those who draw near, safe for yourself, and safe for the life flowing through you. True influence does not need to expand quickly. It needs to endure. You will notice that the connections forming around you in this season are fewer but deeper. Those who remain do so not because of excitement, but because of trust. They do not look to you for entertainment, but for stability. And it is within such relationships that life multiplies, not loudly, but surely. At times, you may be tested by a new kind of weariness, the weariness of carrying influence. When that happens, remember to return to the foundation. Freedom is not sustained by giving more, but by receiving again from the right source. Keep resting, keep listening, keep realigning. Influence drawn from a depleted source harms both the giver and the receiver. Influence that flows from the source of life nourishes both. Engrave this in your heart. True influence does not leave your imprint. It leaves the imprint of life. When you move on, life continues. When you are silent, truth still resounds. When you are no longer present, what was sown keeps growing. This is the height of freedom, to work without possession, to lead without binding, and to love without demanding return. You have come a long way from the invisible fortress to full freedom, from freedom to true influence. Remain on this foundation. Do not rush to expand. Be steady in going deeper. For from the foundation of freedom, everything you touch will carry life, and life, when free, always finds its way. My child, you are one who has passed through the fire, no longer carrying the smell of smoke, no longer afraid of heat, no longer startled by sudden sparks. What remains in you is not the memory of pressure, but the mark of faithfulness. That mark is not loud, it is quiet, yet enduring, like veins in stone, unseen at first glance, yet impossible to erase. One who has passed through the fire no longer lives to avoid difficulty. You live with the clarity that difficulty is no longer an enemy, but a tool that has completed its task. You do not seek the fire, yet you do not run from it. For you know this: what the fire could take has already been taken. What the fire could not touch has been strengthened. Your peace does not come from the absence of trials, but from the fact that trials no longer have the power to define you. You do not need to speak much about what you have endured. Your presence tells the story. There is depth in your gaze, calm in your responses, and maturity in your choices. You do not react to the waves. You navigate by the current. When others panic, you anchor. When others rush ahead, you keep the rhythm. This is not an advantage, it is a responsibility. That mark is also revealed in how you see others. You no longer rush to conclusions or quickly attach labels. You have seen enough to know that the surface rarely tells the whole truth, and so you are more patient. You listen more deeply, and you discern more carefully. You can say no without wounding, and say yes without losing alignment. One who has passed through the fire learns the art of being both gentle and steadfast, an art that cannot be learned from books, only through experience. You are no longer drawn to position, nor threatened by authority. You understand that true power does not need display, and false power does not require noisy resistance. You enter spaces with respect but without fear. You speak truth without imposing it. You keep boundaries without building walls. This is the authority of one who has been refined, an authority that needs no proof. In this season, you will also notice that calling no longer comes as urgent commands, but as deep agreement. You know when to move and when to stop, not out of fear, but out of understanding timing. One who has passed through the fire is not swept up by false urgency. You can discern what must be done now and what must wait to mature. This discernment protects you from both reckless steps and costly delays. The mark of one who has passed through the fire also places upon you a new responsibility to preserve life while expanding influence. Expansion is not about adding tasks, it is about adding depth. You learn to speak less but more truly, to do less but more precisely, and to remain present long enough for what you sow to take root. You are no longer afraid of being misunderstood, because you know time stands with truth when truth is lived. At times, you will be invited into spaces where fire is still burning, where others are panicking, where conflict is hot, where pressure is rising. You do not enter to extinguish the fire with emotion, nor do you stay outside to keep yourself safe. You enter with a presence that has been refined, so that the nature of the fire may change from destruction to refinement. This is the role of one who has passed through the fire, not to judge those who are burning, but to help them not be consumed. One who has passed through the fire knows that every height requires humility to stand firm. You do not treat the lessons you have learned as capital to impose. You treat them as a foundation from which to serve. Your humility does not make you smaller. It keeps you safe to keep learning, safe to adjust when needed, safe to walk alongside others without standing above them. In this season, you will see more clearly the difference between legacy and reputation. Reputation must be fed by attention. Legacy is built by faithfulness. You choose legacy. You choose to sow what can grow even when you are no longer there. You choose to place life into the hands of others without retaining ownership. One who has passed through the fire understands that what endures most is what does not bear their name. Know this indelible mark does not make you immune to weariness. You still need rest, still need realignment, still need to return to the source each day. But weariness no longer frightens you. It simply reminds you to tend to yourself. You rest not to escape, but to continue. You listen not because you lack direction, but because you honor the rhythm of life. Your maturity is shown in knowing when to stop, so that you do not lose what has been entrusted to you. Child, One who has passed through the fire carries a testimony that does not need to be told. That testimony lives in the way you love when tested, the way you stay aligned when pulled off course, and the way you choose life when ease invites compromise. This mark does not need defending. It protects itself through consistency. And as you continue to walk, neither rushing nor hesitating, that mark will clear the way for seasons to come, seasons where legacy is handed on, where life multiplies, and where light no longer needs to be shielded. Walk on with the peace of one who knows they have been tested, refined, and firmly placed upon an unshakable foundation. The road ahead no longer requires many words. It requires your presence, bearing a mark that cannot be erased. My child, what comes next does not arrive as a new assignment, but as a quiet transformation. Legacy begins to take shape. This legacy is not built by dazzling moments, nor does it require widespread recognition. It is woven day by day in choices no one sees, in actions that receive no praise, and in a quiet faithfulness known only to you and to me. Legacy does not need to be announced, it needs to be lived. You will come to see that legacy is not what you leave behind after you are gone, but what you sow while you are still here. Each time you choose truth over convenience, each time you keep a boundary rather than seek comfort, each time you give life without demanding return, you are sowing. These seeds do not sprout all at once. Some need time. Some need shade. Some need the patience of many seasons. One who has passed through the fire does not rush the harvest. You trust the process. True legacy does not depend on the position you hold, but on how you are present. You may be in a small space, yet carry great depth. You may speak little, yet each word bears weight. You may lead without standing at the front. This is the paradox of legacy. It grows when you do not try to expand it. When you are faithful to the portion entrusted to you, that portion expands in the way I have ordained. In this season, you will find yourself becoming a point of reference for others, not because you are perfect, but because you are stable. When others are unsettled, they come to you, not for you to fix things for them, but for you to help them stand steady again. You do not take away their responsibility, you help them rediscover their center. And when they stand firm, the legacy has been passed on, not through long instruction, but through a trustworthy presence. My child, legacy is protected by humility. When you keep a humble heart, you do not turn the lessons you have learned into a standard by which to judge others. You remember that you, too, once needed time, patience, and light, one step at a time. And so you give others what you yourself received, not pressure to become like you, but space to become who they are. A legacy like this does not create copies, it awakens identity. There will be times when your legacy is tested by invisibility. You sow and see no results. You invest and receive no feedback. You remain faithful and your name is not mentioned. Do not lose heart. My child, invisibility is fertile ground for what endures. What must be protected from display is often sown in silence. I do not forget what you do in the shadows. I am guarding it for the right time. Legacy is also shaped by how you handle failure, not the failures of others, but your own. When you stumble, you do not hide, nor do you condemn yourself. You rise with honesty and continue walking. From this, others learn that mistakes are not the end, but part of the journey of growth. Your legacy, therefore, does not carry the scent of perfection. It carries the scent of hope. True legacy does not require you to have answers to every problem. Often, Legacy lies in knowing how to ask the right questions, how to remain in uncertainty without panic, and how to keep peace when outcomes are still unclear. This posture teaches others how to live amid ambiguity without losing direction. In a world quick to draw conclusions, the ability to stay with a question is a rare gift. Legacy is also built through how you allocate your time. You give time to what nourishes life, not only to what produces quick results. You prioritize relationships that require presence over activities that demand appearance. This choice may not be understood immediately, but it creates depth, and depth, over time, becomes a place of refuge for many. Do not worry if your legacy does not take the form you once imagined. I rarely build according to human imagination. I build according to what the soul needs. The legacy you leave may not bear your name, but it will carry life. It will continue to operate even when you are no longer there to oversee it. That is the sign that you have handed ownership back to me, and only what is entrusted in this way truly endures. Remember, this legacy is not secured by effort, but by faithfulness sustained over time. You do not need to do something grand. You need to do what is right again and again. In love, in humility, in clarity. Each day you choose this way. Another thread is woven into the tapestry, and as time passes, the tapestry will appear not loud, not showy, but strong enough to support the footsteps that will follow. As this journey moves toward a deeper stillness, you will sense a very different movement, not urgency, not strain, but handing back. Handing back is not giving up, it is placing everything into the right hands. You have gone far enough to understand that not every outcome needs you to hold it. Not every direction needs you to control it. And not every story needs you to keep writing it. This handing back does not strip meaning from what you have done. It completes that meaning with wholehearted trust. You will discover that completion does not arrive like a ringing bell, but like a breath settling into a steady rhythm. Completion is not the end of activity. It is the end of grasping. You no longer clutch outcomes, no longer constantly check for responses, no longer measure yourself by external standards. You stand within what has been entrusted to you and say, "It is enough not because everything is perfect, but because everything has been placed where it belongs." This is the wisdom of maturity, knowing when to continue and when to let life itself carry on. The peace of one who has lived faithfully within their portion is not a peace of avoidance, but a peace of consistency. You look back without shame and move forward without panic. You remember the seasons of fire, the stretches of silence, the times of being misunderstood, not to reopen pain, but to recognize what has been formed within you. You no longer need to prove that what you went through had meaning. The way you are present today has already answered that question. This handing back also makes you lighter in a very real way. Lighter not because responsibility disappears, but because the burden does. You continue to love, to serve, to sow, but without carrying the anxiety of having to control where the seeds go. You sow with the joy of one who trusts the soil, and because you trust, you do not need to stand guard day and night. You allow time to do its work. In this completion, you will see clearly the boundary between what you can do and what you do not need to do. You no longer try to fix every misalignment, explain every misunderstanding, or rescue every situation. You choose what truly needs your presence, those places where life increases when you are there. Everything else, you hand back in peace. This is not indifference, it is wisdom that preserves energy for what is essential. Your peace is also revealed in how you face the future. You do not draw detailed maps to reassure yourself, nor do you abandon yourself to vagueness. You walk step by step with a trust that has been tested. You know the direction may adjust, but the axis remains unchanged. And because the axis is unchanged, you do not fear detours. You understand that every turn taken at the right time is part of guidance, not a sign of being lost. Completion also brings with it a rare gift, the ability to rejoice for others without comparison. When you no longer measure yourself by outcomes, you can celebrate another's success without feeling diminished. You can stand beside them, support them, and step back when needed, not from insecurity, but from sufficiency. Sufficient in identity, sufficient in your portion, sufficient in knowing that life does not compete, life resonates. In this season, you will find yourself speaking less about yourself and more about what is unfolding through many others. You tell stories that do not carry your name. You protect life more than you protect image. And in that choice, you discover a deep joy, the joy of one who knows they have placed the stone in the right place, even if they do not stand upon it to be seen. Let this handing back seep into your daily rhythm. When you work with full presence. When you rest with permission. Do not mix rest with guilt, and do not mix work with anxiety. Each has its time. When you honor the time of each thing, peace does not need to be sought. It is there, like solid ground beneath your feet. Remember this as well. Living faithfully within what has been entrusted to you does not mean living small. It means living precisely, precise in motive, precise in rhythm, precise in love. This precision is not loud, but it endures. It allows you to look ahead without haste, look back without clinging, and stand in the present with gratitude. Gratitude not because everything was easy, but because everything carries meaning when placed rightly. This journey closes not with a period, but with a full silence, the silence of one who is handed back, who has completed, and who now lives in a peace that needs no defense. From that silence, you will continue to walk unburdened, unbound, carrying refined life, sown legacy, and freedom as your foundation. You do not need to walk faster, you only need to walk true, and what is true, when fully lived, is always enough. Thank you for listening to today's message. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so we can continue receiving the living word together, building a steadfast faith, and walking in the boundless love of God. Amen.